Humans are creatures of storytelling, and for time immemorial, the backbone of storytelling has been myth and legend, heroes and villains. In wanting to show people how to be a good person, we make stories about heroes who are the best person, no longer characters but archetypes of a goal. And as the moral quandaries of the masses became more nuanced, so too these archetypes became more nuanced. Take the Greek hero Heracles, for instance, a demigod with 1 foot in Olympus and 1 foot here with us, simultaneously blessed with immeasurable strength but also cursed with a horrible temper. Still a hero, but just not perfect. His real battle is within, and his is a story of self-improvement. In a lot of ways, although being a demigod, Heracles is more human than Achilles, the impervious man with a kryptonite heel. But these heroes haven't gone anywhere. They just wear tights now. We all know Batman vs Superman is bad for myriad reasons, but is there anything worth saving? One of the early stumbling blocks for DC against Marvel was that the MCU opened with Iron Man and the DCU opened with Superman. And unfortunately, generally speaking, Superman is ugly boring. You see, Tony Stark is everything we like about Batman. He's cunning and brilliant, and most importantly, human. Well, most importantly, rich, but slightly less important, human. When your hero is a god amongst men, it's very difficult to have any stakes. That's why the villains in the first movie were just more Superman. But they made a much more interesting villain in the next movie. Nah, I'm kidding. I actually mean...
The world has been so caught up with what Superman can do that no one has asked what he should do. Let the record show that this committee holds him responsible.
I think the most clever concepts in this movie revolve around Senator Finch. As I've said before, I think it's best when your villain fights your hero where they're weak. This helps create stakes because if your expectation is for your hero to problem solve by being strong, then when he saves the day by being strong, it doesn't feel like much of a victory. But it also gives your hero a place to grow and have an arc. Self-reflection and self-improvement are moral concepts that we as a society want to disseminate. So when the hero overcomes their weakness and defeats the villain at the end, they didn't just win in a physical sense, they won in a moral sense. They were heroic. So what is Superman's weakness? Well, in this film, hubris. Now, literal kryptonite definitely plays a plot point in this film, but the initial conflict is that Superman thinks that he's morally superior to the government, and so just acts as a free agent without any checks and balances.
Superman acted like some rogue combatant to rescue her and people died. Don't invent a conspiracy theory to put back his halo.
He wants to only answer to himself.
You're saying...
I don't care. I don't care what they're saying.
And Senator Finch thinks otherwise. Let me make a correction about her though. Senator Finch is one of the main antagonists of the film, but I don't find her villainous at all. In the beginning, it's hard to trust that her concerns are earnest, and you could easily believe that she's just really on a Superman hating campaign.
Must there be a Superman?
There is.
Until she meets our actual villain, she is given the opportunity to join in a Faustian pact, and she refuses it.
I'm blocking the import license for your mineral.
Even though they both basically have a shared enemy in Superman, she maintains the moral high ground against our real villain, but also our hero, who currently isn't acting very heroic.
Can I call you Jew?
You can call me whatever you like. Take a bucket of piss and call it Granny's peach tea. Mm-hmm. Take a weapon of assassination and call it deterrence. You won't full a fly or me. I'm not gonna drink it.
She explains that this is not how things work and that we need to come together and have open communication.
In a democracy, good is a conversation, not a unilateral decision. So I urge Superman to come to this hill of the people tomorrow to see those who have suffered. The world needs to know what happened in that desert and to know what he stands for.
So like Hera to our Heracles, Finch releases these accusations out into the world like a beast for Superman to slay. A Nemean lion of sorts that publicly questions his moral character. The Nemean lion that Heracles had to slay had skin that couldn't be pierced by swords or arrows, and so too Superman won't be able to punch his way out of this problem. And like Heracles cleaning the Aegean stables not through strength but through cleverness, Superman does rise to the occasion and defeats the beast. Not through a feat of strength, but by humbling himself. He comes to the meet he was called to. And for a moment, I think he and Finch are on the same page.
This is how a democracy works. We talk to each other. We act by the consent of the governed, sir.
He's realized his weakness and he decides to... If you hear one of your friends complain about Batman, you might hear something like, oh, well, the real Batman would never do X, or the real Batman would never do Y. But in reality, we all kind of have our own Batmans. Your father's Batman is probably Adam West, but my Batman was from the animated series, and they're very different. So I tend to think this line of thinking is why a lot of people had a very difficult time with Jesse Eisenberg's version of Lex Luthor. People were looking for something relatively familiar, but instead got this millennial Silicon Valley type. And trust me, I certainly don't like all the choices he made, but I did enjoy the tortured genius energy that Jesse put into the role. I started to like Lex Zuckerberg around this speech.
Books are knowledge, and knowledge is power. And I am, what am I? What was I saying? The bittersweet pain among men is having knowledge with no power, because that is paradoxical, and
Knowledge without power is paradoxical. You see, Lex is cursed with genius intellect and has mustered as much power as he can, but he still has very real limits. Then in waltz his Superman, born with the power of a god, a being with seemingly no limits.
Fucking Lex Luthor is a human being that's like, who the fuck is this asshole? I'm smart! I can do anything! Why am I being counted out? You're not human! I'll shave my head and I will fucking defeat you with my knowledge! If I have to scour the universe to find what makes you weak, I will fucking bring you down! Because I am super! Because I wasn't born super! I was born weak! That makes me strong! And I lost my hair!
And for a moment, he does beat him.
And now God bends to my will.
And when that fails, his desperation leads him into his own Faustian pact.
Would you like to assume command?
Yes, I would. Yes, I would.
Very well. Let's begin.
So the whole opening of the movie is a little bit of a retcon from the previous one to give Batman some motivation, but I'm still at least glad that some effort was actually made to give Batman a connection to Superman. And much like the concerns of Finch, he brings up a pretty solid point himself.
He has the power to wipe out the entire human race, and if we believe there's even a 1% chance that he is our enemy, we have to take it as an absolute certainty.
And he's right. As much as it pains me to say it, the same sentiment was echoed in Suicide Squad.
What if Superman had decided to fly down, rip off the roof of the White House, grab the president right out of the Oval Office? Who would have stopped him?
Well, not these frittatas, but still.
You know, my father sat me down right here, told me what Wayne Manor was built on.
Railroads, real estates. I know him.
First generation. Made their fortune trading with the French. Pelts and skins. They were hunters.
Unfortunately, the Batman is the harbinger of the second dumbest thing, but the most cringy by far, which is...
Why did you say that name?
Am I to believe that Batman faints when someone calls out their wife's name in the grocery store? But we're not here for that today. Let's rewind. The movie is called Batman vs. Superman, so the climax should have been that. Batman has a similar beef with Superman as Lex does.
That's fear. You're not brave.
And Batman finds a way to level the playing field, which actually allows for us to have some real stakes. When they hit each other, you wins because you know that damage is actually being done. And it all culminates into... which could have been amazing.
It wasn't easy to make, Clark. It took years and cost a fortune. Luckily, I had both. Now, you're seeing it now, aren't you? What the rest of us live with every day. Your own mortality. But I didn't have to go easy on you. A different binding agent, a stronger mix. I want you to remember that. I wanted to remind you to stay out of my way. In all the years to come, in your most private moments, I want you to remember the one man who beat you.
And that would have been a great lead up to the follow-up Justice League movie. But it feels like a producer ran into the room and was like, hey, where's the CGI city-sized fight? And thus we got this horribly boring fight between three invincible people who are just punching each other, and luckily Batman always happens to be just off screen. All the nice things I got to say about the BVS fight are thrown out the window with this one. It's like a different crew directed and wrote these two scenes. The first fight helps explain the conflict between the two characters while making the violence actually count.
I bet your parents taught you that you mean something. My parents
parents taught me a different lesson. Dying in the gutter for no reason at all.
In this fight, there's no deeper meaning, it's just kill big monster guy who they had the audacity to call Doomsday. And since all the active fighters are practically invulnerable, it's hard to keep your eyes open as you just watch the never-ending cascading bayhem in front of your face. Again, this is supposed to be a what we can salvage, but the point of making the comparison is that the parts that are good are pretty good, and the parts that are bad feel like they came late. I think it was only a few rewrites away from being a pretty good successor to Chris Nolan's Batman universe. And maybe therein lies the problem. Nolan showed us that Batman worked best in a dark and gritty setting, but Zack Snyder is not Chris Nolan, and his idea of dark and gritty is probably too close to what a Hot Topic executive thinks. But the DCU didn't start with Batman. It started with Superman, and then the first Batman movie had Superman and Wonder Woman in it. And those two maybe aren't the best recipients of the dark and gritty treatment. And so when the movie was poorly received, I fear that they learned the wrong lessons. Well, if the audience doesn't like dark and gritty, I guess they want light and funny. Just look at those Marvel movies killing it over there. But the lesson they should have learned was that the audiences want good first, and they provided bad. And The Smoking Gun is Joker making $1 gazillion, and it's way darker than anything to come out of DC in movies. So moving on, we eventually get the Justice League, which is just a sad clone of the Marvel style, who they had spent 10 years developing.
What are your superpowers again? I'm rich.
So hopefully DC can go back to the drawing board and try to find their own unique voice again. I think with a lot of their characters, the dark thing can work, but doesn't have to be for all of them, but it also doesn't have to be for none of them. And hopefully moving forward with this new movie with Robert Pattinson's Batman is a great step in the right direction. Thanks for watching. Till next time. It can feel sometimes like we're plagued with reboots, remakes, and sequels. Surely it wasn't always like this. But when did it start? And will it be like this forever? Well, to get into that, let's talk about something called the 20-year cycle. We see it in all forms of art: fashion, music, movies.
Hello.